Hi, this is Dr. Robert Hasty. I am the Dean and the Chief Academic Officer of OCOM, and welcome back to another episode of the OCOM Podcast, Modern Medical Education. And today I have, one of my dear colleagues, who's just an incredible leader here at OCOM, Dr. Robert Minkus, MD, PhD. We are talking today about artificial intelligence, AI, in medical education and modern medical education, and so excited about this. So welcome to the show, Dr. Minkus. You are a mud FUD.
A mud FUD, that's me. Yeah, actually, I had my PhD first. I'm a FUD mud.
Oh, really? Wow.
I'm quite proud of that. But thank you, Dean Hasty. I'm really happy to be back.
Thanks. I did not know. So that's what you do. If you get the PhD first, you call it a FUD mud.
No, but I was really proud that I got the PhD before the MD because I didn't enter a combined program. So that was the days where I typed my dissertation on a typewriter, but we had our first Mac show up in the late 1980s, and I actually completed my dissertation, which was important because if you have your margins off, you have to redo it.
Wow.
I had my margins off. So.
Wow.
The Mac was my savior.
I love it. You know, it's so funny. We have our Director of Medical Education Operations, MedEdOps, Malia Bingham. I don't know if you've ever seen her keyboard. She has the old-fashioned typewriter keyboard with a return on it, but she likes the clickety-clack. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, and she's like, super modern, but she just likes that tactile or haptic feedback from the typewriter. So. Yeah. Anyway, typewriters haven't. We are definitely not talking about typewriters today. We're talking about one of our favorite topics, and actually, and I asked Dr. Minkus to be on the show today because it's just one of those things. We sit around, we drink coffee all the time. We talking about AI and just how inspired I think we both are with AI and the uses here at OCOM and and nationally and stuff like that. And we said, well, heck, this is too good not to be on a podcast, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that because without even thinking about it or training, it's become integrated in what I do every day. And so that's what makes me excited about it. And we see it all around us and at every level here at OCOM.
Oh, 1,000%. I use it every day too. I'm learning new ways to use AI almost weekly. And, to me, it's a little bit like where we were with the internet back in the mid-'90s, right? I mean, it just kept getting better and better. And I have a feeling that's where we are, it'd be, I was talking to the incoming students, the class of 2029, and I told them, I said, if I could go back and do it all over again, I would in a second. And to be a medical student now, to use AI as a medical education tool, learning tool, as you go through medical school, I mean, it's incredible. It's like the difference between walking and riding a bicycle. And, a couple of them came up to me afterwards and they said, well, heck, it would be, it's good that this medical school at OCOM leans into AI. Some of the other places, they don't always lean into AI and, sometimes people are afraid of it. I'm like, well, it's a little bit like being in the 90s and saying, oh, this internet's not going to be any good. We're not going to adopt the internet or something like that. I mean, you have to. I think it has that much promise.
Yeah. No, I love that we can capture the enthusiasm and the opportunity. And as you were talking, I was thinking it's become such a learning companion, right? So as a new organization where we're learning, we're growing, we're continuously improving, right, and innovating in the best ways, and learning from each other and having a tool with that much power at our fingertips is beyond exciting. And I think we're seeing it throughout the world right now. And the fact that our students recognize that and it resonates with them creates just an incredible opportunity for us all to learn from each other.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things with like the students, I even mentioned it to them, and this is one of those things, people that say, well, how do medical students use AI? The first thing I always talk about is the Notebook LM. If folks haven't seen that before, it's incredible. It's part of Google. We have Google Workspace. In fact, we've had it, forever, here at OCOM. We actually had AI from day one in medical school. But to me, one of the coolest features that the Google Workspace Education has is that Notebook LM. So you can actually put any material in there. You press a button, it turns into a podcast, and it's like two people talking. And what do you think about that new treatment for congestive heart failure? And if they talk too slow, you can do like 1.5x or whatever. I mean, I think it's incredible. And then they take all the objectives, they load it up, and they say write us 5 board style questions for each one of these learning objectives. And of course, there's always concerns about hallucinations and stuff, but I think it's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. And what I've learned that our students, we learn how to learn, right? Part of our medical school and self-directed learning and our innovative approach is, to become lifelong learners. And I've even just from developing an anatomy program to get us launched, where I relied heavily on AI for alignment with the objectives in the courses, our students who use AI start picking up on the hallucinations. So they become, mastery or of the material and knowing when to question something or not. And I find that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I'll tell you, even today, actually, it's funny, we talked about Malia before. I had a meeting with Malia this morning. Next week, she's rolling out this new or next week or the week after next, this new psychometric use of AI, where she actually takes all the de-identified data from the exams, puts it in AI, and has the AI basically give psychometric summaries on the performance of each test question. And before that would take, tons of time, and they would actually have to, do this ahead of time and meet in person and kind of go over it and everything. She's actually saying with this, they can actually just do it all by email, get through it, because, we try to get the test grades back to the students, within a day or two and stuff like that. And, so there's a time constraint there. But this AI actually may speed up, how we process the exams and, get the data back. So I'm excited about that. But that's just one day today. It just happened to be a conversation this morning. And it seems like every time we turn around. So 2 weeks ago or a few weeks ago, I had all this data. We did a Google Forms survey feedback on, attendance at this thing. And I just put it in AI and I said, write a detailed summary or executive summary, include the Likert scale for each of the evals, and then pull out quotations, representative quotations of the feedback from the things. And in 2 seconds, it did something that years ago would have taken me or somebody else, maybe hours to actually assemble and put together and, format and stuff like that. And literally just a blink of the eye.
Yeah. No, it's powerful for all of those things, for, quantitative, qualitative data, things that would take time. And, it's an incredible time saver. And even just thinking of that, I went back and was looking at all of the uses that I had of AI and sort of asked it, to track what I did and break it down into different categories. I just want to share just from a management perspective when you think about it. So in just basic task areas, so from assessment writing, from the psychometric analysis, study questions, objective development, alignment, anatomy lab, policy drafting, standard operating procedures, the list goes on. But it estimated that I save between 9 to 14 hours a week by partnering it, right? And that's a total of 10 weeks per year.
Wow.
Right, on average. That's incredible when you think about that efficiency without even thinking about it, but partnering in a way, being aware, embracing it for what it's good for and using it as a partner versus either or, right? Using it together from a leadership perspective. It's unbelievable when I think about it in those terms.
Yeah, it's incredible. That's a 20% improvement in productivity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll actually use it just to give me a summary of, data or documents, and it's actually pretty incredible. I had a person that was asking about the org chart the other day, and it's just it's a drawn out org chart. I mean, it's, done by a computer. We use this program called Organimi that is this online org chart thing. I just uploaded our org chart and I said, give me a detailed summary of our org chart and then draft FAQs to it. Within 2 seconds, a few seconds, it had this beautiful summary. It talked about who was reporting to who, what areas were overseen, the reporting structure, all these different things. And then it actually did FAQs, and it was interesting, okay, who's the longest tenured employee, all these different things. It was actually pretty incredible in just a few seconds. So, I believe that 20% improvement in productivity is what you're seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that goes a long way towards more meaningful activity. And if we go across the board in the different departments, and what I appreciate is we're in an exploration and learning phase. So it's not for me to dictate to faculty or to the students where we can learn from each other. So from saving time, whether it's SOAP note grading in developing the correct rubrics and learning how to do that, and saving our valuable time for creative time, innovative time, student facing time is it's really revolutionary, like you talked about. And we're just scratching the surface of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the list goes on, and I can tell you from an administrative standpoint, I use it like, recently I had to do a corrective action plan on an employee, and it was great. I put the issues in there, and it puts it out, and I said, make it a little nicer or whatever, and made it pretty nice.
Right.
We had to do an email about something, and it needed to be a persuasive email, and make this, rewrite this in a persuasive style, and it did. I mean, I would have probably tortured myself 45 minutes redoing that email, and in 2 seconds it did this great persuasive things, and it put some things in there. Policies you mentioned, SOPs. I mean, we had an idea of how we wanted some SOPs done, and I just put it in there. It had this beautiful, like, 3-page SOP on this whole process, and it actually had thoughts about how to do this procedure that I hadn't even thought about before. Or we have an exam relook policy, and I'll tell you, actually, my first draft, I put it through AI. It actually created, I'd say, 90% of what's in our final policy was created by AI. From stuff I fed to it. It's pretty remarkable, the uses.
Yeah, and I love, just to touch upon what you said, what we put in matters, right? And learning how to do that, and we're very fortunate with an incredible IT team with expertise who make their time, available in trainings for our faculty to learn, right? Best practices to do that. But as we become more skilled at it, right? What we put in matters, and what we get out becomes more impactful. And it's true. It's not always ready for prime time, and it goes off the rails every now and then, but you can recognize it. And again, you have a dialogue with, the tool, and figure out, where we went wrong, or where it might have learned something from you. And it's pretty effective.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned SOAP note grading. I'll tell you, so I've been in medical education over 20 years. That's probably my least favorite job in a medical school, is grading SOAP notes. I think I'd rather clean the bathrooms than grade SOAP notes. And I did plenty of that when I used to work at Publix, years ago. But last time when I first tried it, I uploaded some old SOAP notes I had graded. It did a better job than I did. And it picked up a couple things I didn't, go through the first time around. So yeah, that's another great tool.
Yeah. And what I love about it is we become more progressive in our thinking, right? As we develop rubrics, oftentimes when we do it ourselves, they're more complicated than it needs to be. Using the artificial intelligence to help simplify it, and it be just as impactful to pick up on the major things, I think really frees us up to, focus on the big picture of things. And I think, you say master the basics, right? Let's do that. And it really helps when we're overly complex and getting into the minutiae and details of things, which it does great. But it also, helps. It's the old zoom in and zoom out.
Yeah.
Helps you zoom in when you need to, and zoom out as well, and make connections that we might not otherwise do, as you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. And also I love the frictionless nature of it, right? There's so much that we're doing now as a result of the internet technology that's already frictionless, just like, banking. And actually, I just read the other day that they're eliminating Social Security checks, so all Social Security checks will be done electronically. Actually, I'm kind of surprised they hadn't done that before, but,
right.
but there's so much more frictionless in our world now. And, I was thinking about the letters of recommendation. So I get asked to write letters of recommendation all the time, right? And I'm always happy to do it. And I had to do this one that was like, for this big thing. And so I uploaded the person's CV. They had sent me the resume and CV. I uploaded it, and I said, write me, and it had to be like a between 2 to 3 page recommendation. It was for a master fellowship. And so I said, write me 2 to 3 pages. talk about, you were talking about the prompts, right? The quality of the prompts. I put in all the little details I personally knew about him and my interactions with him. And I had this beautiful letter, and I just found out the other day he officially got it. So,
Yeah, that's wonderful.
so it was, again, and then the old days, right? I mean, we used to hear sometimes that you have attending physicians that are super super busy. The medical student, asks for it. The attending wants to do it. They just don't have the time to write the letter of recommendation, or in some cases maybe they have an old template that's like,
Right.
they can adopt from something else that's not real long, but they're busy, and they put it in. Now they can actually put in the prompts what they think about the student. It'll draft the letter for them, and then they just review it, and so it really makes it more frictionless on how they do just little things like letters of recommendation. It may change how medical students actually get in residency, right? If you can improve your letters of recommendation, which is in the top 5 things that program directors look at, there may be people going into residency because of AI that weren't there before. So the implications, it's sort of the butterfly effect.
Yeah. And I love what was in the answer, in that, in the years that I've been in medical education writing letters, I do have templates, or I take a letter and start changing the name. But when I can think about what I know and be honest and heartful, and then put that into, a process that then helps me craft something that's new and really reflects my relationship with the individual, I think that's less than, or it's much more than using a template. So people would say, well, I'm not doing that. It's not honest or heartfelt. I would say it's the opposite. It allows me the space to be creative and get what I think, what I feel, and then, drafting it in a professional manner is impactful, and it can make a difference in their lives. And that's exciting as well.
Yeah. And I don't want to, come off too Pollyannish about, AI, because I'm sure that there's, and I talk to docs all the time. AI is going to put us out of business and everything. And it seems like a conversation I've heard for a long time, right? It seems like technology is going to, put us out of business and stuff. I mean, I heard it with the internet, right? 20 years ago, well, Dr. Google's going to put me out of business. They're not going to come to me, as an internist anymore, because, they can just kind of Google their symptoms and they get the diagnosis and treatment, or, whatever. And, but I'd be curious to, I'll give you my impression of this, but I'll be curious to see what your thoughts are. I mean, especially like the radiologists and stuff. I mean, I hear that the most from them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I love the approach. If I go back, I'm trained as a surgeon, and it's a clinical diagnosis. In fact, if you got a CAT scan in the program that I was in, you had to go in front of the M&M department, and present the cost and the radiation to do the CAT scan. Now, sonograms come along, and in pediatric surgery, I'm pretty good at it. Ultrasound's pretty good at it. Combined, we're really good at it. So when we think about, radiologists who might be working late at night in front of a screen, their programs are getting better and better, but it might miss some things that they might get, and vice versa. So really just sort of partnering and embracing the technology. And again, our fear when we get into the either or mentality, it creates fear, versus that it's, more than one thing are possible, and embracing it, and the values and benefit, and in situations where, we're resource limited, I mean, it allows us to care for more people as well. So I think that's my take on it, that I see it as a tool like anything else. I've been using spell check for a long time, Epic, to write to notes. I like to make the joke that I was waiting for Epic since I was 5 years old, and noticed my penmanship was poor, So it's like finally it's arrived, with all of those things. So the upsides of the technologies that we use, and being able to cross-reference information material, I think, built into the EMRs, you can click on up to date, right from the patient's chart. I mean, who would have dreamt of that, years ago, to be able to do something when you're thinking it through? And, we don't think twice about that. So I think the technology and the information is going to get better. And those who embrace it and train in it will really be sort of leaders and at the forefront of what's coming in the next 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's funny with the whole radiology thing. Now, first of all, surgeons, I think you guys are pretty good with AI, right? I don't think it's going to, displace the need for surgeons, anytime in the future. But yeah, you never know if they do robotic driven. I don't know, maybe it might change. But with radiologists, I always like to point out that cardiology, EKGs have actually had AI, they didn't call it that, but algorithm readouts on the top of EKGs for heck, probably close to 40 years, right? And I don't know of any cardiologist that lost their job because of that, right? In fact, if anything, I think it actually created more work for cardiologists, and the cardiologists. I mean, there's not enough cardiologists, right? And there probably won't be in our lifetime, right? Because of the demand for cardiology. So I think it's a little bit like the old buggy whip salesperson, right? If you're a buggy whip salesperson in the 1900s, yeah, 1900, and you say, oh, these automobiles are terrible, they're going to put us out of business. And that's true if you didn't adopt to the new thing. But if you adopted to the automobile sales from buggy whip sales, you did pretty good, and so I think that's true. There, some folks may know about Buzz Cooper. I don't know if you know about Buzz Cooper and the Cooper Papers. I believe he passed away recently. But I would say that he is the main person that incited the most growth in medical education in the last 25 years. So around 2000, he started publishing these papers called the Cooper Papers. That is what some people call them. And Buzz would say, hey, we're going to have this huge need for physicians, and he would go through a pretty strong argument. And actually, I have his slides. In fact, one of his favorite slides, and he showed it to me about 20 years ago, was to talk about GDP, gross domestic product of the United States, correlating with physician demand. And over the last 100 years, there's almost a direct correlation. So as GDP rises, so does the demand for physicians. And all that concern about the internet, Dr. Google is going to displace us. If anything, so much more that we have more physician demand than ever. And and I would also make it true with technology in the United States. Every time we have new technology, unemployment actually goes down. And typically the type of jobs that folks have, are actually more sophisticated and higher paying than they had previously. And, it's part of the reason why we have this incredible quality of life now. So, and I completely agree with the EHR, right? If you can take away, some of the painful aspects of, charting and stuff like that and make it fun, I mean, it's like a blessing, right? I mean, this could be the best thing ever for physicians, right? There is data that for hospitalists in a mature electronic health record environment, that hospitalists, we spend 5 times as much time on the electronic, charting as we actually do with direct patient care. And in the ambulatory side of things, it's a 2-to-1 ratio. They have something called pajama time, where docs will go down, go home at nighttime, chart in the system, in their pajamas or whatever. And, the systems like, Cerner and Epic, they actually produce reports, and you can actually pull it up, like how much time are, people spending outside of work on charting, because you can, tell when and where they're documenting and things like that. If you could walk out the room and have a completely note, and then as a physician just go through, okay, that's accurate, that's accurate, that's accurate, change that wording, send that drug off to the pharmacy from this recommended treatment based upon, the algorithms from the AI. I mean, it's going to make life incredible, right?
Yeah, and I think it takes us back to, what's essential, right? To go in a note, document actually what happened versus, our 7-page template or whatever we use out of necessity. So I do see it's changing, and it's already in our doctor's offices, and they get to speak freely, and that will develop more and more. When I was practicing, we heard about that. It wasn't there yet, and here it is. So I think that's an incredible thing. And getting back to, you brought up robotic surgery. If that's not a form of artificial intelligence, I don't know what is, where you're sitting at a screen, you can make a big motion and it moves a micromillimeter, on the patient. It's a form of it. And I was thinking, there's an old at the end of a surgery, you have to do estimated blood loss. And, they ask the surgeon, it's like, 50 cc's. You ask the anesthesiologist, 2,500 cc's. But those are the things that can probably be, calculated and estimated and paired up with physiologic function and subtle changes and very heart rate, certain things that, we've been using in the ICU for a long time and starting to pick up on those things. So it's here and it helps us.
Oh, yeah. For estimated blood loss, I don't know if you saw this, but a few years ago, they debuted an app on the iPad that you actually hold up each gauze to this, and it says, and it adds it all up. So for each gauze, you put it up in there,
Right.
and based upon, I guess the color of the gauze, and,
Right.
it's some standardized gauze. You could say, at the end of the say, you lost, 300 cc's of blood or whatever, or you lost 4,000, cc's of, of blood,
Right.
recommend, consideration of blood transfusion or
Right.
whatever, right?
Right.
That is, so incredibly cool. Yeah, you remind me, our friends, we have good friends over here at Advent Health and, Celebration. They have the Dr. Patel, who's world-renowned prostatectomy robotic surgery. He actually engineered robotic prostatectomy. People literally around the world, former U.S. presidents and stuff, get their prostatectomy from him here at Celebration, Florida, which is 20 minutes away from us. And he actually just did one, and I think it was like 14,000 miles away, or on the other side of the world. I forget, maybe it was Africa or whatever. But but right here from Celebration, doing the robotics. So it's an exciting time for sure.
That's very exciting. And when you think about all that would go into that and having trained individuals there, it's pretty exciting, and it connects us more than we would think. So it's something that can sort of bring us together and elevate the standards of care for our patients.
And I love what you said about, maybe it takes away some of the barriers and you can really focus on, caring for the patient and stuff.
Right.
One of our, our mission is to train caring and competent osteopathic physicians, and to be able to, take away barriers for that is a good thing, right? How many times have we heard patients historically say, I go to my doctor's office and, they're on the computer the whole time. I just see the back of their head or, whatever, right? And to be able to change that experience with technology, that's a huge promise. Now, I am convinced, I'm actually right now working on an article with Dr. Oshikoya, that we almost had a perfect storm over about a 20-year period of time in medicine. And I would say probably from the early 2000s till, up until very recently, where, we actually had a significant amount of burnout in the United States for physicians, right? And I think there was everything going after physicians, right? You had the electronic health record, and that created, and especially the early days of the EHR, some of them weren't that great, and they created extra stress for the physician and the pajama time and, all these type of things. And so I think that created some stressors. Of course, we had a transition from, independent practice to employed practice models. And so you had, relatively, new healthcare administrators all of a sudden having to supervise physicians. And then, at the same time, you had people that were used to having autonomy with their practice now that were employees. So I think that created some of the challenges. Then you had, reimbursement issues. You had a change in scope. So I started medical school in 1996. When I started medical school, the word hospitalist had not even been invented yet by Bob Wachter from UCSF, right? It was invented when I was a first-year medical student. Now, that was my job when I graduated residency, a full-time hospitalist, a word that wasn't even invented when I started medical school. So I think that, to me, and if you track that forward, over this 20-year period. So you have all these different things. We had this increase in suicide rates, especially in the early 2010s, where people were stressed, right? They were doing different jobs than they had before. In some ways, it was a little bit harder. You had a lot of barriers in place. You had the patients coming in, after Dr. Google, second guessing, which was kind of new to some of the docs at the time. But now we're actually starting to see, from what I've seen, the physician burnout's actually going down. And when I talk to docs, they seem happier than they have for a long time in terms of satisfaction and things like that. And we have this this Generation Z that are going through medical education, getting out to practice, and I am convinced that they're going to be the best generation of physicians ever because their desire to serve and to care for patients is something I've never experienced this much, caring. So so we're right in the article, and I don't know what exactly we're going to call this, but maybe, the perfect storm is over, or the skies are clearing, or something like that. It's optimistic, I think, and I think the AI is the same.
Yeah, and to that, and AI and technology is a part of it, with a generation of students with values and a fresh way of viewing things. It does provide a lot of hope and in the direction that we're going. And when I think about it, when did we go from working hard enough to be tired, and feeling very satisfied, to working hard and being tired to feeling burned out? And it's around those times with a lot of the extraneous factors where we lose autonomy, we lose, our dignity, and as physicians, those things were real. And I think maybe the 2010s to the 2020 were an acknowledgement of that. And now, what are the tools? What do we need to do about it? And I think the generation of physicians that we're seeing, right, can understand it in a way and not have that same relationship to where it's all bad. No, we know this is, it's rough season. We're equipped to deal with it and actually thrive in the environments and then make a difference.
Yeah. And I know our students are going to, they're going to crush it, I think, with the opportunities out there now. When I look at every hospital system around us, like, Advent Health and Orlando Health, they all have chief of AIs. These are physicians that, heck, AI wasn't even announced till 3 years ago. Now it's their full-time job as chief of AIs for the hospital to basically look at some of the data and, to use AI in different ways, and, either implementing it to be able to chart, being able to use informatics to, better understand the data to, help improve patient outcomes in a better way. My friend, Dr. Sanjay Patani, runs the mission control over at Advent Health, which is, probably one of the most freaking impressive things I've ever seen. They have all the data from all the hospitals in this huge, huge room, maybe 6,000 square foot room, surrounded by screens and, patient flow and stuff like that. But to be able to transform the lives of patients in a positive way using this artificial intelligence to making sure that the resources are where they are, and also, the poor resources that are being wasted, it could actually save money, it could save lives. I mean, it's an incredible time, and I think, if I was a medical student right now, I would certainly be leaning into this technology.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, serving our patients in our communities. And we've learned a lot of things, right, from the social determinants, or, what we choose to call, the experience of our patients and communities today, and then recognizing, not identifying, but where can we allocate the resources, and what do we have, what don't we have, what do we need? I mean, this is the perfect opportunity. So if you're on the side of, bioengineering, biostatistics, to just user-friendly interfaces to do our job in a way that we can find the joy in what we do to care for others, I mean, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. I'll tell you, well, I could go on forever talking about AI with you, Dr. Minkus. I guess we sort of do anyway. So I guess until the next conversation about AI. But anyway, thanks for joining today. Any last thoughts or comments, from you?
It's an exciting time, and we take a positive approach. I'm a hopeful individual. I don't go from a fear-based. Our students are embracing it. Our faculty, I was just mentioning that one of our new faculty members is going to do some training in AI in healthcare, which is unprompted, but very exciting. So we're going to continue to learn from each other and grow and be better for it.
Yeah, well, we're so lucky to have you here, as a leader, your faculty, in your team, your department, so incredibly lucky to have your leadership, your mentorship. I mean, you're literally one of the national experts on leadership coaching, and it just to have your talent, your wisdom, your expertise here at OCOM is such an incredible blessing. So thanks for all that you do for OCOM, and thanks for being on the show, and thank you for joining another episode of OCOM Modern Medical Education, our podcast. Please join us every month, and please let me know if you have any questions. So thank you.